As the Stanley Cup playoffs have progressed, the Edmonton Oilers just keep getting better. On today's edition of Locked On Oilers, I'm going to explain why the Oilers are in the driver's seat to win the Western Conference and return to the Stanley Cup Final for the second straight season.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Victory Monday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. This is my second Stanley Cup playoffs as the host of Locked On Oilers, my third NHL season with Locked On, my 10th season doing digital hockey content. And I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So on today's Victory Monday edition of Locked On Oilers, we're going to start with a big overarching conversation about the shape the series is taking and why I think Game 3 was very emblematic of the direction of the series. In our second segment, we'll highlight some strong individual performances from players like Stuart Skinner, Connor McDavid, and Zach Hyman. And in our final segment, I'm going to set the table for what lies ahead and why I am nervously and excitedly, frankly, starting to believe. So to start things off, coming into this series, my expectation was that the Oilers would largely play a bit more of a defense-first type game, and they would be a bit more patient, and they would be, frankly, a little more reliant on the counterattack and their star players making plays happen. And by and large, so far, that is what's happened. And I do think it's interesting because earlier in the playoffs, in both their series against the Avalanche and the Jets, the Stars were largely the team that was absorbing pressure and creating off of the counter. And those rush opportunities, those odd man rushes, those gaining the offensive zone with speed sequences, those are the most valuable types of plays in hockey because you are creating advantageous circumstances. You're getting players in conflict, defensive players in conflict where they need to pick and choose whether they want to play the pass or play the shot. You're getting the goalie in conflict because they need to determine whether they're going to play the pass or the shot. And you're introducing more variables to the defense and making their life harder. And we talked about that pretty extensively on Friday's edition of Locked On Oilers, walking through a couple different plays that worked very well for the Oilers in game number 1, even though they didn't win, and why, frankly, I felt that as the series went along, it would likely shift in this direction. And by and large, through these two games, that's where this series has been won. And I give the Oilers a lot of credit for having the resilience and the patience to play a defense-first type of game, especially knowing we're going to be in your own end a lot. And you are going to put guys in disadvantageous positions. You're going to have Evan Bouchard having to withstand forechecks. You are going to have guys like a John Klingberg or a Jake Wallman who aren't the most physical of players have to eat some punishment in their own end to move the puck. And I give the Oilers a lot of credit for adapting as these playoffs have gone along. And I kept saying that, and the everydayers from the regular season will recall me saying this. The Oilers needed to start making progress as far as being a better hockey team. And generally speaking, that plays out over the course of the 6.5 months that is the regular season. And then with each passing round of the playoffs, generally you have to play a little bit better if you would like to keep advancing because the teams you come up against are better. And I am very happy with what I have seen from the Oilers so far. And I do want to say, job's not finished. 2-1 is not an insurmountable margin by any means. The Stars are entirely capable of having a game where they go nuclear in the blink of an eye, as we saw in game number 1. So continuing along that thread, I've been very interested to watch the individual matchups, who has been oriented to play who and why. And the way the Oilers have built this lineup where it's a bit more defense oriented and why it's largely been Zach Hyman and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins with Connor McDavid at 5-on-5. That grouping has some interesting skill complements where Nuge is a little bit of everything. Hyman is there to be the most aggressive forechecker imaginable. He leads the entire playoffs in hits, has almost twice as many hits in the playoffs as he did in the regular season. And they've played all of 13 playoff games so far. So I think it's really impressive to see how Hyman has made himself a bit more effective through that. And you need a variety of ways to beat teams. And I do think that's what's most encouraging here about the Oilers is they are getting contributions from everyone. And I don't want to step on toes in the second segment talking about Stuart Skinner, John Klingberg, but when you have enough depth that over the course of an entire playoff run, every single guy more or less gets to have a moment, that's really exciting. That is the type of that is the type of goal distribution, there we go, word I was looking for, that you need if you want to make things happen. And this Oilers team has really shown some growth because you think about where they were a month ago in that Kings series and how dire it looked defensively for long stretches, especially on the penalty kill. The Oilers have shown the capacity to win a rock fight 1-0. They have shown the capacity to win a high scoring game 6-5 or 5-4. And when you can play any type of game and win in any type of game, you're going to be very well situated for playoff hockey where teams are, generally speaking, pretty evenly matched. And I thought the Stars played a pretty good game today, and they held the puck a lot more. They created offense a lot more, but to the Oilers' credit, they absorbed a lot of that pressure. They were able to create some 2-on-1s and 3-on-2s going back the other way. They were able to use their foot speed to put defenders in conflict. I think about the one McDavid sequence where he passed the puck off the boards to himself to go around Thomas Harley, and I think Harley's a tremendous defenseman. I think Harley is one of the 10 best in the league, and the fact that McDavid can do that to a guy who is one of the best in the world at his position, I think it speaks volumes for just how gifted and how unique a player McDavid is, where he has the capacity to make world-class players look average or frankly outright bad. And the last point I wanted to make in our opening segment before we take our first break, the Oilers have shown you quite a bit so far. They have played 3 very different teams in LA, Vegas, and now Dallas, and they have won different types of games. They have won games on their goaltending. They have won games on their special teams. They have largely won games at 5-on-5. But as we sit here, you have to know that Dallas will make something happen. And Dallas is a good hockey team, a very good hockey team. And maybe they just don't have it. Maybe the Oilers just are this good, and whatever the Stars are going to push back with isn't going to get the job done. But at the very same time, you as an Oiler fan and the Oilers as a team have to know that push is coming, that air of desperation, that glimmer of attrition kicking in where they want to survive. And survival mode goes one of 2 ways in hockey. You either play like Vegas did in the closeout game of Game 5, where you're very tentative and you're very sheepish because you don't want to make a mistake, or you go crazy, or you go to that desperation place of survival mode where you're treading water for hours out in the open ocean because you don't want to drown, even though your muscles are on fire, even though you feel the fatigue creeping in, you know it's survival mode. And I expect the Stars to have some of that in game number 4 on Tuesday night. And it would frankly be kind of shocking if they didn't have the capacity to throw out a counterpunch type game like that. And the Oilers have shown the ability to bounce back from adversity very well in these playoffs. And I think, frankly, last year's Stanley Cup run was very instrumental in developing some of that. And this is a veteran team. They're the oldest average age team in the entire league. And I don't think losing in the Stanley Cup Final last year was particularly helpful. I don't think guys are sitting around going, "Oh, I can't believe we lost the Stanley Cup. That stinks. We're going to do better this year." Maybe for some of them, but I think there's an air of professionalism about this team that they are able to not get too high, not get too low, meet the moment, one foot in front of the other, one good shift, one good period, one good game mentality, and really start to build something special. We are going to take our first break of today's edition of Locked On Oilers. And when we come back, I'm going to tell you why the Oilers' depth from top to bottom has been a differentiation point in this series. Coming up next. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, groceries, and entertainment, it's really easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in as your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on takeout. Now I meal prep, I budget, and save more. And instead of juggling multiple finance apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even set up long-term goals like a vacation. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Victory Monday / Sunday night edition of Locked On Oilers down here in the States. Memorial Day on Monday, so 3-day weekend. And going into a Game 4 on Tuesday with a 2-1 lead, having won a game in Dallas already, you have the opportunity now to really seize control here, to strangle the Stars here. And when you get a performance like today out of McDavid, out of Nugent-Hopkins, out of Hyman, out of Stuart Skinner, and you still have guys like Leon who didn't get on the sheet today, you still have depth guys you really feel strongly about like Corey Perry, like Adam Henrique, and I know Connor Brown had left this game with an injury after getting hit high by Petrovic, but at the same time, knowing the Oilers have the depth they do, that they don't need Connor or Leon to go crazy every night. The fact that their defense has probably, and I would say almost undebatably, been the strongest part of the team on a consistent basis during this playoff run. There is really low volatility from this defense year over year. And I was talking about it on the Monday edition of Locked On NHL with Gil Martin and talking about what's different between last year's Oilers and this year's Oilers. The defense is a lot cleaner. It's a lot smoother. Darnell Nurse is not making befuddling decisions. He is not taking the big chance to try and create a play and creating risk and adding problems for the Oilers and himself. And no Vincent Desharnais, and maybe you want to say Desharnais was important on the penalty kill and you see the difference year over year there. But at the same time, they're getting really good hockey out of guys like Troy Stecher and Brett Kulak. And in the case of Stecher, who's by and large been a seventh defenseman for most of his career in the NHL, to get functional play out of him alongside Darnell Nurse, you got to feel really good. And the other part of that conversation, eventually Matthias Ekholm is going to be available to play. And you would assume it's Stecher that's going to come out. But that's a good problem to have, that you have 7 defensemen once Ekholm's healthy that you feel reasonably good about playing in a playoff game. And you say the same thing about the team's forward depth, where they haven't played Victor Arvidsson or Jeff Skinner in a while, and you have the luxury of going to those guys if you need them for a specific reason. But today's game, I felt that second period was probably the best hockey Stuart Skinner's played all year. I really felt that the Oilers did a good job of absorbing pressure, of not asking him to do a ton other than in that second period. And look, there's going to be another couple 100,000 words written about Stuart Skinner's volatility as a goalie over the course of his NHL career when all is said and done. But today, he was the Oilers' probably most important player in that respect, that he kept them in that game and gave them time to kind of, I wouldn't say dig themselves out because they were playing with a lead for most of this game, but at the very least gave them an opportunity to win. And this is going to sound a bit abstract and theoretical, but as you guys know, the everydayers have heard me talk ad nauseum this year about the idea of thinking about hockey the way you would talk about an academic subject like physics or history. But your goal is to be close. And if you play as well as you can and you leave it all out there and you don't feel like you shot yourself in the foot, if you can say all of those things unequivocally, you got to feel pretty good about yourself. And we know that hockey is very high variance. We know that the best team does not always win. Often it is the team that gets hot at the right time that continues to improve and escalate their performances as the playoffs go along. But the Oilers are really starting to make things happen for themselves. And I think the biggest telltale is the way they were able to create off of the rush today. The fact you got 3 assists from Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, you got a pair of goals from Zach Hyman and from Connor McDavid, and you got a John Klingberg goal as well. And the way the Oilers were able to create off of the rush in this game, I think, is a really strong indicator that the team's defense is working. And this is a nuanced and layered subject, so I'm going to do my best to explain this in a way that makes sense. But in the contemporary NHL, and I attributed the quote to Daryl Sutter. I had read it in an Athletic column the other day, but the best defense in today's NHL is to not play defense at all. The best defense in today's NHL is to be active in transition, to prevent zone entries before they happen, or to break the puck out quickly. Because if you do that, you're playing less defense. You have less opportunities to make mistakes. And the Oilers in this game played more defense than the Stars. They spent a good chunk of this game in their own end and had to absorb pressure, block shots. And Stuart Skinner had to play a really good game. He had to fight through screens. He had to fight through traffic, make the big save. And I don't think the Oilers can realistically do this all of the time, but I do think there is the ability here for them to make something happen. I do think the ability for the Oilers to get to another level from where they're at right now is still here. I think the power play has another gear to get to. I think the penalty kill, frankly, has another gear to get to. And I wouldn't be surprised if you get one more of those crazy little mini runs from Connor or Leon where it's like 7 points in 2 games and you walk away thinking, wow, those are 2 of the 5 best players in the entire sport, because they are. And when you are in the playoffs this time of year and you are in every game, and the way your team plays and the types of players you have keep you in every game, it's hard not to start talking yourself into this. It's hard not to start believing. And I really, really, really do try to be as impartial and objective as I can, because I want to give you guys the most actionable and important information so you can make your decisions. Because I still look at this show through a journalistic lens of my job is to give you as good of information as possible so that you can make decisions about supporting the team, about buying tickets, about buying a jersey. And that might be a very idealistic, frankly, maybe even naive view of the role of media, especially in sports. But for me, that's the operating procedure here. I want to make every Oilers fan understand why things happen, how they happen, and what they can do as far as understanding the game and being a better or smarter fan. And I think it's corny when people do fan police things and start doing the name 5 players, because frankly, this is an awesome experience and you want as many people to get involved with this as possible, as opposed to looking at it through the lens of, oh, well, I was here from the beginning, I deserve more credit. Because frankly, it takes all of us. It really does take all of us. And the Oilers are a perfect encapsulation of that so far in these playoffs, where they've gotten goal contributions from, I think it's 18 different players now, they said on the ESPN broadcast during the game. So with that in mind, we are going to take our second and final break of today's edition of Locked On Oilers. And when I come back, I'm going to tell you why I think the Oilers are going to win the Western Conference, coming up next. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Monday/Sunday edition of Locked On Oilers. And I, for one, couldn't be happier to have you here. The show only works with an audience. And I know I talked about this on Friday, but sitting here now in the Western Conference Finals for a second straight season, it's really given me a sense of fulfillment. And I've been very lucky and privileged to do the work I do in sports media, and games like today are why we do this. And moments like this are why we do this, because there are stories to be told, stories that matter. I have continually circled back to, and the everydayers heard me talk about this all the time, but Connor McDavid's role in the cultural identity of the sport as the great Canadian hockey player, taking up that mantle from Sidney Crosby. And of course, Sidney Crosby still playing hockey at a very high level, is still one of the better players in the world. But narrative-wise, McDavid is the best player in the world, and he wants to be in that lineage. And he has a golden opportunity here in front of him to make something truly special happen. And there's a lot of work to be done, but the simple matter of the fact is this very well might be the best Oilers team McDavid has ever been on. And you give a player at the prime of their physical life an all-time great, I shouldn't say all-time great, but a personal great team for him, and really orient the team around him, around Leon, and you build it out from there. And there are always going to be lingering questions, how you make the money work, how competitive can they be going forward. And that's why it's so important to talk about the here and to talk about the now. I forget what the Hemingway quote is exactly, so forgive me for paraphrasing, but it's something along the lines of, there's neither yesterday nor tomorrow, there is only now. And if you're the Oilers, you have to be looking at this as an opportunity to go for the kill shot. If you can get this series 3-1 going back to Dallas and you only need to win one more game, you are putting yourself in the driver's seat to have both a nice break after, if you end the series early, depending on if Carolina can actually make something happen or not. But at the same time, you can only control what you can control. And to their credit, the Oilers have done a masterful job these playoffs of responding to adversity, of bouncing back, and of answering the bell. And all of that simultaneously does not necessarily correlate with eventually winning the Stanley Cup, but those things can't hurt. And that's really the key to understanding my Oilers optimism now, is they are winning games in a variety of ways. They are getting contributions and a range in the types of contributions from players all over the lineup. I mean, Zach Hyman has turned himself into a human wrecking ball. To have more hits in the 13-14 playoff games they've played than he did the entire regular season, that shows a deeper level of commitment, a deeper level of resolve. And I think you saw the Stars really start to get frustrated in this game. And I think that's what's encouraged me the most, is when a team starts needing to be desperate, when they start making those pinch decisions, am I going or am I staying because we need to score, because we're losing, those factors, you add all that up, plus the fact you have the all-time great players in McDavid and Draisaitl. You have an elite player in Evan Bouchard who is marching his way towards a lot of Oilers record books for the defenseman position in the organization, and they still have room. That's what's so exciting here and so tantalizing about this. We know the Oilers are playing pretty well, but they can smooth this out just a little bit more. There's a little more meat on that bone. There's a little more juice left to squeeze. And when you have the capacity to keep getting better while playing at a high level already, you are going to put yourself in a position where you might be able to beat a Florida. And I had said in the second segment the idea, hey, if you're in every game, you're hanging around, that's where your stars make a difference. And we saw last year against Florida, the Panthers went up 3-0, and then the Oilers came storming back, and they won Game 6 in the most convincing, dominating way possible, and won that game. It got to a Game 7, and were one goal away from winning the whole thing. And the everydayers have heard me say it a ton this year. I am subscribing to the McDavid LeBron theory that LeBron lost to the Mavericks in the finals, and that changed him fundamentally. That changed him as a competitor and as an athlete. And it made him hone in even more. It made him focus even more. And McDavid, to a lesser extent, I wouldn't say he had an incredible regular season by his standards. Obviously, a great season. Anytime you finish top 10 in points, when you miss 10, 13 games is really impressive. But to have that type of regular season where you felt a little unsatisfied, some injuries, the suspension, and you start to ask yourself, is it going to come together for the Oilers this year? I mean, if you go back and you look at the record in March and April, the team was actively bad. The team was actively bad in March and April, finding ways to lose against inferior opponents, giving up 2 or 3 goals a clip to start games and playing the entire game down 2 or 3 goals with no McDavid and no Draisaitl. Just a really difficult place to occupy. And to their credit, the Oilers have responded in kind with some really well-rounded lineup performances where some nights it is going to have to be Stuart Skinner, and some nights it's going to be Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and some nights it's going to be Zach Hyman. And most of the time, they can get by with just McDavid or Draisaitl doing something special. But you get a game like today where the Stars definitely had a sense of desperation to themselves. They had a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because of the way the Roope Hintz Darnell Nurse thing played out on Friday in Game 2. And Pete DeBoer, the Stars coach, is still kind of upset about it. He's still angry. And the Oilers very easily could have fallen to some of their own mistakes. They could have given Dallas more opportunities to win this game. And to their credit, the Oilers answered the bell. And this time of year, you're in these games, you get control of these games, you build a lead, you protect your lead. You got to feel good about that. That is as satisfying a win as you're going to get in the National Hockey League in the last week of May. When you break a team for 6 and you only concede 1 and you get goals from players all over your lineup, you got to feel like something special is happening here. And we are still in the early phases of this series. Like I had said before, the Stars are going to come back at some point with a bit of a punch, and it'll be incumbent upon the Oilers to answer that with a counterpunch, which they have done very well during the playoffs this year. So the last thought I want to leave you with before we wrap and we end today's show, I got a lot of credit, man. I got to give Stuart Skinner a lot of credit for the season he had to bounce back from being benched the way he has in the playoffs, where he has been tremendous at stretches. He's been awful at stretches as well, don't get me wrong. But to have a performance like today where he was arguably the difference between winning and losing, because when the Stars were pushing hyper aggressively in that second period to tie this game and try and get back in the game, Stu was answering the bell and fighting through screens, a lot better with his positioning today, a lot less herky-jerky, a little bit more square and good angles. And I expect there to be at least one more Skinner implosion just because the nature of him as a person and the nature of the goaltending position. But this is 2 years in a row now. The Oilers have dropped Stu opposite Jake Ottinger, and Jake Ottinger has been the one who starts to get flamed and skewered for the way they're playing in a given series. So it's nice to see Stuart Skinner getting some praise. It's nice to see people taking it easy on him. And look, I've been very harsh on him. I think it's within reason to critique players for poor play. He knows he needed to be better, and the hard reset Chris Knobloch was able to give him by sitting him for a few games has clearly worked wonders, or at the very least has enabled him to fake it until he makes it. And right now, if he's playing the way he is, the Oilers are going to have a really good chance to win the Stanley Cup. That will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Thanks so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen of the day. For your second listen, be sure to check out Locked On NHL and Locked On NHL Game Night on the Locked On NHL feeds, wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.